yes, baby. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Eddie Winters. You're listening to the Rock and Roll Coup d'etat. It gives me such a distinct pleasure and honor to bring on our guest, Ms. May Pang. May, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing fantastic.
It is a pleasure to have you on the program. I'm sitting here with Tommy Arnold.
Hi, May.
Hey there, how are you?
I'm good.
That applause just for you this morning.
How sweet is that? That's great. Thank you.
Exactly. We've been having a wonderful morning talking about. I hope you don't mind. We were talking about you earlier.
Yeah.
And
I was wondering why my ears were burning.
Exactly. We've been chattering. Everybody is excited to have you on the program, and just to talk just a little bit about your books, your life, and what you've been up to, and we're just so excited. It's such a rich and wonderful story, and we're just so pleased that you take some time out to share that with us. And by the way, I was telling Tommy we had the number 9 Dream coming out of the break. You sang on this, and that is something that a lot of people don't know about. And I wanted to start that off. How did you get on the mic?
Well, how did I get on the mic? Well, it was kind of weird because when I was, being with John, I've always, even working for him at one time, I'm around him. But I was quite surprised when he was doing this song that all of a sudden he called out to me and he said, "Listen, I need you to come into the recording studio." And because I was outside at the, doing some other work, and I said, "Okay, what's up?" So they had already set up a mic. They had already set up everything, and they said, "I need you to whisper my name." Like really whisper it, and I'm going, "What?" And they sort of set it up for me, and it was quite weird to do it, but I did. And he insisted he wanted me to do this, and I said, "All right, I'll do that." And I didn't think that I didn't know what he was up to, but this was, it's all John's idea. And then later on, when they needed the background singers, the girls didn't come on time, and he turned around and he says, "Come on, May, you're going to go and sing."
Wow.
So there were 4 of us singing. It was John, myself, this kid Joey Dambra, and Laurie Burton. Laurie Burton at the time was the wife of Roy Cicala, who was the engineer, our chief engineer that John always used, and who owned the record plant on the East Coast. And so Laurie, in her own right, is a singer-songwriter. She wrote "I Ain't Gonna Eat Out My Heart Anymore"
right.
with Pam Sawyer. Of course, the Rascals made a big hit with that.
Of course,
so
yes.
she herself, and she has a great voice. So I'm still in touch with her as well to this day. But so the 4 of us sang all the background.
It's such amazing. I think we were talking about this before. It's to have had the journey that you had going back, working in the industry and it kind of going, meeting John, working for John and Yoko, and then to eventually end up recording vocals on a track. And it's such an indelible punctuation, if you will, to that time. Do we mind if you talk a little bit about how you started how your journey began? I guess getting into the record industry, working for Alan Klein, and doing and how that your relationship developed into meeting and working for John and Yoko.
Well, I just happened to one day I was like out there working. I wanted to work, let me put it that way. I was looking for a job. I quit school, telling my mother, I quit school. It was kind of scary.
Right.
And so I just went on and started looking for a job, and I got sent to this building, and this guy wasn't going to hire me, and I knew it. And my girlfriend met me, and she said, "Listen, you know what's in this building?" And I said, "What?" She goes, "Apple Records." And I'm telling you, my head spun around. I said, "Apple Records, like Beatles, Apple Records?" And she looked at me, and I looked at it, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to go and ask them for a job." And she says, "You're crazy." I said to my girlfriend, I said, "What's the harm?" Because at the end of the day, if they say no, I'm no worse off than where I am.
Right.
And so it happened that I got up there and I said, okay, I'm looking for a job. And the woman looked at me like, yeah, okay, next. Nothing ever happens. And she saw me staring and looking at stuff, and she said, is there anything else I can help you? I said, well, I was just wondering if the Beatles ever come here. And she just laughed hysterically.
Right.
And she said, no, nothing like that happened. Just at that moment, and maybe the angels are watching over. And just at that moment, I will tell you that that all of a sudden all these doors start to open. There were 2 doors, and all of a sudden all these people started filing out. I didn't realize it was their lunchtime. I thought it was past lunch. I was a 9 to 5.
Right.
Yeah.
And now this was a 10 to 6 thing. So people were just going out to lunch at 1 o'clock. So she just happened to mention. She yelled out. She goes, "This girl's looking for a job. Are there any openings?" And this one guy looked at it and says, "Why don't you come back after lunch?"
Nice.
And that's all it was.
Wow.
And I came back, and I made sure it was way after lunch, and I went for the meeting, and I met a couple of people. They said, "Can you type?" I said, "Sure." I couldn't type to save my life.
Right.
I was taking academic courses. That wasn't in my repertoire.
Right.
So I said everything, and they said, "Fine, we'll see you on Monday."
And that was
I
it.
Like, wow. Yeah. And
Wow.
that's how it started.
And so, and that work. I mean, were you doing secretarial work and then doing doing I guess chores, running out, grabbing things.
I was doing almost anything and everything, because what it is for them is like, I wanted to learn. I was in the business. I was now in the business, and I wanted to learn everything. And
you were what, like 19 at that age, at that time?
I was still only, I was still 18. I was officially still 18. And this is, and so it was kind of like, wow,
You're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you're a production coordinator.
Yeah.
Exactly.
At first, you know what? I learned all about publishing. That's the department I was in. And I thought, wow, this is great. I wanted to be in this so much that I'm in publishing, and publishing people didn't realize is where you learn about the songs, you learn about the people that wrote the songs, the whole thing, and I thought, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want, and I had a great time, because not only was I doing Apple Records and Apple Publishing, which was everybody who was signed to Apple.
Right.
I had the 3 main guys, excluding Paul. Everybody else was on the label. And Alan Klein also was in control of and owned the CAGS Music at the time, which was now, of course, is the Sam Cooke catalog.
Right.
And he also had the Cameo Parkway catalog, and he also had the Rolling Stones catalog.
Yes.
So I couldn't have been but in the greatest situation as far as a publisher.
It was publishing heaven, I imagine.
Yes, and that's exactly what it was. It was publishing heaven.
And so, at what point did you become, I guess, starting to work for John and Yoko more exclusively from the publishing?
Oh, I think that, you work for everybody's publishing. I did George's publishing. I mean, I was glad. I did all of the All Things Must Pass album.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, George couldn't have been nicer. I mean, he really was the sweetest person. And we were on the phone talking, and he walked me through a few things on the publishing. But for working for John and Yoko, that didn't happen. I started doing big projects with them in December of '70, because Yoko had come into town. That had come into town to do 2 mini documentary or 2 mini movies, not documentaries, but it was some idea that Yoko had. One was Up Your Legs Forever, and the other one was Fly.
Right.
And in 3 weeks they shot it, they edited it, and they showed it at the the Avant-Garde Film Festival. And then after that they left town, and every so often when they would need a project or something, they would end up calling me at my desk. So I was still working the regular publishing, working for them. And then as time went on, I started to work for them more and more, and then it became more permanent.
Right.
In '71, it became more permanent.
And as the story, your story goes, you were doing this work, and I guess John and Yoko having a little bit of trouble at a certain point, leading, I guess, into maybe '73 at some point. You'd worked on several records that they'd released, and kind of got to know them as your bosses.
By '73, I had been working with them, and I had been. I've done a lot of things at that point. And '72 was really the rough period because that was the Nixon period.
Right.
The whole thing, and that's when it was all the Elephant's Memory, the David Peel. It was the more radical period.
Of course.
I was very happy to be working at another office, not at the house with them, because I was not the only person that worked for them at that time. There was a few of us, and I was just happy to be at another spot.
Right. Yeah. I was going to ask you, with other people working, did you guys commiserate as to your job and talk about the I guess working in such a high energy environment?
No, you know what? No, because everybody had something different. I worked at the office that was in Soho, and so I really commiserated more with some of the editors of the film, because we had the film division, Joko Films,
right.
And a lot of the film editors were upstairs, and so I saw them. The other people were more in and out at the home, and I didn't see them as often.
Right.
So I was quite happy to be where I was.
Right, and so I imagine in a work environment in any creative environment when people are not, say, getting along or drifting apart, or relationships, it definitely is an area where you kind of sort of want to avoid some of the tension.
I did not. Well, first off, we had the Hells Angels. They were, the Hells Angels were there. There were a lot of other things going on. That wasn't my scene.
Right.
So I was quite happy to be away from it, and I can go home.
Sure, you can clock out, if you will.
And yes, and then when there were times that they all of a sudden showed up, it was like, oh no, they're here.
Right.
Oh no. And it was, the fact was that we weren't that far away, because they were down in the West Village, living there, but it was just far enough that I didn't have to be in the midst of what was going on that end of it.
Right. And it seems with as we know about John getting into a lot of the activism, and of course the campaigns for peace, and in his trying to immigrate to America, there was the whole as we know now, the FBI getting involved, and the Nixon and all of this. At that time, did John ever was he vocal about, I guess, his paranoia, or his accurate paranoia that he was being followed?
At first, like all of us, and including myself, we couldn't believe that things like this was happening.
Right.
And when you start to unravel and you start saying, what is going on? I used to hear clicks on my phone, and I'm going, that's kind of weird.
Wow.
And, I never thought anything of it, because I wasn't doing anything. I'm not it's like what they're saying now. We live in a different age, and I'm one of those type of people. I'm not doing anything wrong.
Right, of course.
I'm not worried about the NSA. They're not going to look at me. I'm not the one doing anything.
Yeah.
That's because we don't live in the same age as what we did back then.
Yes.
Back then, we're more concerned about our privacy. Now we're living at an age where privacy really is a different way of looking at things. If you're not doing anything wrong, do I care that they're listening? I'm looking at the people that are blowing up, and they've been able to hack into everybody's,
phones and computers, and yes.
So if the government can prevent something from happening, fine, do it. Because I'd rather be here than to be listening, than I'm worried that they're going to be listening. What? For me to talk about what clothes I'm going to be buying?
Right.
If that's, or what I'm going to make tonight for dinner, that's not...
Well,
it's not about that.
You're also, you're on the advisory board of Women in Music. You do the Amazon conservation team.
The Amazon thing is a very big thing. I work with them. I also, Julian Lennon now is on our board, on the advisory board. It's great. When you meet these wonderful, Indians down that live in the forest. The person that started this organization, Mark Plotkin, and along with his wife Liliana Madrigal, they're not only talking about the rainforest. They are trying to save the indigenous people because they are the only ones that know about what the forest holds and the magic that's in there. And so it is amazing when you hear him, when he does a speaking thing. If he's ever in your area and you hear about him, I would strongly suggest you go listen to his speeches and his seminar. It is it's fascinating, and the people that have gone down. I mean, I've met a couple of the Indians. You walk away going, oh my God, what just happened? You feel it.
Right.
I mean, the late Phoebe Snow was a very good friend of mine.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and she used to come to my house all the time. So, and I asked her to do a little, singing thing at one of the events, and she was freaking out, and one of her bandmates was also freaking out. God knows why. But at one point, one of the Indians was coming through the room to bless the room and the event, and they stood there. And by the time he left, and all he did was walk through and bless it. By the time they walked out, everything was calm.
Wow. We need to do that here.
I was going to say.
I think maybe, hey, you never know. But I'm just telling you, these are things that work, and I can't explain it.
Yes. Well, that's why my point was that the reason the FBI wasn't. It's because you're a good person. You do a lot of good things, so that's why the FBI is not going to take you down. You're it's like you're the ones they want. Like you're doing positive action. So
you know what? There's too many bad things in the world.
Exactly.
Yes. Guys, out there, please. I'd rather go back. The 60s and 70s, especially, are not going to come around again.
Oh, no. It's long gone, yes.
Yeah, and it was a great time. I just had a music industry reunion, and there were a lot of people in there that I hadn't seen in years. And, and it was great to see them and to see some that are, you go, they're still here, thank God.
Yeah. Well,
and
I think
we honored a lot of people that weren't there. One of the guys, you're in San Francisco, right?
Right.
One guy that all of us knew, and he was a great promo man. His name is Lou Galliani, and his whole brothers, the Galliani brothers, they were very big in promotion out there. And, it was just naming all the people, and it was just one of those things where your heart breaks and you say, God, I can't believe they're gone.
Right.
So for me, the music was a very big thing. It, as I told Dick Clark one time, I said, listen, music was a big thing. It really drove my life to where I was going. John and I were always talking about all the different music and how much I got him back into just talking about music and writing.
Right.
And, this year is John's 74th. Oh, but to finish that thought for a second was that I thanked, Dick Clark because American Bandstand was a big influence in my life.
Oh, of course, yes.
But going back, and this year is John would have been 74.
Right.
And in 1974, 40 years ago, it's kind of weird, John had, around this time, was his number one single, his only number one single.
Right, which we played earlier, Whatever Gets You Through the Night.
Yeah. And, and you think about all the things that was done in the time we were together. I mean, he was just, how crazy it was or how good it was just music that he was enjoying. And he was enjoying being back with his, quote, brothers. And I say that, and his brothers, of course, were Ringo, George, and Paul.
Right.
I mean, a lot of people didn't know that Paul was at our house all the time. And a lot of that anger dissipated, including with George. It dissipated. I was just happy.
Of course, yes.
Well, because of you, like as a musician and growing up, because of you and facilitating the relationship between Julian and John, Julian Lennon was one of the first people I ever saw in concert, and was a huge musical influence on me, especially because I was relatively, I was young. I was like 10 or 11 when he came out and had his big start. And I mean, that's. It's. I
know John would have been very proud of him today, and just his first album was so mega. It was just wonderful, and I'm still very close to his mother, and I spent time with her last year at her home because she's always saying, "I hear rumors you're coming over," because I'm always saying I'm coming and I never show up.
Right.
Now it's like, oh. You are coming. Okay.
And it's interesting too because there's as a lot of journalists and throughout history, I guess even with John Lennon products that have been released after his death, there has been the phrase "the lost weekend" that gets tagged to an 18-month period of creativity and being very social, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic with your book, Instamatic Karma. It documents that, and also your first book, Loving John, it documents this whole other side that is not this, I guess, what the tabloids or what a lot of the discussion is that it was this big debaucherous epic thing.
Well, there's certain camps that would like to leave it at that and make it sound like that's what happened. But when you really talk about the things that went on, hey, when the actual events that took place, I was the one that was there.
Right.
So, but people have, I've seen where the events have changed over the years, and I said, gee, that's not how it happened. But a lot of people rather believe the folklore in the sense, and to be the reality and the truth, and that's fine. But I just know that we did a lot. There was a lot of music going on. He was back to himself. He enjoyed it. Jagger was one of our big visitors all the time. He was back with his friends, and that to me was important. Not so much that I had to be there in the limelight with him, and there's one of the big things was Elton John that. He got back together. That's not exactly true.
The story of them meeting backstage, and it was this.
No, that's not true because I told Yoko what was happening, and she said, "I need to get tickets. I want to go see this."
Right.
I said yes, and we said we'll get you tickets, and and she wanted. I remember her saying, "I don't want to be too far forward, too far back, whatever row." And so there was a lot of different things, and no, John did not go back till the following, beginning of February of the following year.
Right.
So it was not. We were still with Julian. We saw George. George was so sweet. He was so happy that I was with John that he said it to John and to me. And
Nice.
So it was a lot of things. And you know what? I appreciated the time. I still have great memories. And when I get a moment, and there are things and there are people that John had admired that we used to talk about, people who are singers and songs, I would go up to them and say, I want you to know that you were a favorite of John's.
Oh, wow.
And they go, who? John who? And I go, Lennon. They go, John Lennon knew who I was? And I'll tell you, that's a perfect example was Carla Thomas. Remember?
Oh,
the old, yeah, loved her songs, loved her B-side songs, and I told her. And I said, these are the songs that he liked. He goes, oh, my God.
Wow.
I didn't know he even knew about me. I said, oh, absolutely.
Was there anybody that you were ever starstruck? I mean, if you're hanging out with John Lennon and Mick Jagger and, like, all these powerhouse people, like, was there anybody that ever you were like, oh, my God, I got to go. Like, can I say hi? Like, was there anybody that ever like, blew you away?
Yeah, I will tell you that for me, there was... probably the stars, the movie stars. That's really what threw John into a tizzy. We went and attended the James Cagney dinner, and and people were taking photos because I wish they wouldn't take photos of me and whatever.
Right.
Shortly after the Troubadour, he goes, look at these great, wonderful actors, and these are what impressed him.
Wow. Yes.
And so. He just sort of said, okay, that's what's going on. And, and I sat next to George Burns before he made his comeback as well.
Wow.
So, and it was like, all right, then I met my favorite, Fred Astaire.
Wow.
Those are the people that really impressed John.
Wow.
It's amazing. And when the relationship started, it was in New York, and how long were you in New York before you decided to go to Los Angeles? Oh
yeah, that was the other myth. Yeah, I think we were together for about a month or so.
Right.
But not saying much. But we were, it happened where his lawyer was in town, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and I was there, and Yoko was out of town on some conference, and he turned around and he said to his lawyer, he said, when are you going back to L.A.? Because that's where he lived, and he says this evening on on a 6:00 flight out, and he just looked at him. He says, well, May and I will be on that flight.
Nice.
And I looked over like, we are? Okay.
Wow.
So he said, yeah, just get it all done, And so it was one of those.
Did you like had to call your mom and be like, Mom, I'm going to L.A. with my mom, with John Lennon?
Yeah, I did actually. I mean, for a long time. Well, you know what? I kept it quiet and I didn't tell anybody anything.
Right.
And so my mother didn't even know where I was for a while.
Wow.
And then I remember her telling me she tried to call Yoko to get some answers, and Yoko wouldn't even tell her where I was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she wasn't. My mother was not happy. Of all people, she says I should have been told.
Right.
And then
Wow.
she was right. And so and that was the thing. But it was fine. My mother was, I pay homage to her. If it wasn't for her, I don't know where certain values. And she was a strong person. She was a product of living in China, being part of World War II when the Japanese invaded China.
Right.
Wow.
She was there for all of this. So, it was interesting, and my mother just, kept me on the straight and narrow about things and looked at it, and she was great. And, yeah, we went out to L.A., and we were out, that's how, after we were out to L.A., we're off. And for us, we didn't know when we were coming back because it was more or less, let's go out for a holiday.
Right.
Spend time together. We weren't, and in between, everybody thought we lived in L.A., but we were only out there for projects. We kept coming back to New York, although nobody knew that.
Right.
We were in and out. We came in and out of there. And, seeing Phil Spector was another story, too.
Yeah, I was going to ask, when this started, did you have, you were obviously pretty young while this was happening, and did you have the foresight to think that could this end at any moment, or could this be of a long-term thing? Were you thinking about that consciously while being John Lennon's girlfriend? You know what I mean? Was that kind of a discussion or a topic? Or what were you thinking at that time?
Yeah, what is it? I took each day as it came. I didn't take anything for granted.
Right.
Because when you do that, you're going to be let down. You'll always be let down no matter what, but there's a way of getting let down really bad, or you just say, okay, you just have to figure it out how bad it is and work with it,
Yeah, it just seems like such a, as I've heard you've shared before, that John encouraged you to, for instance, take photographs while you guys were hanging out, and kind of, and by that, kind of seeing we get to see a window of John being, relaxing, or kind of not being the star, but just as a normal individual, and it's kind of just of the moment of evidence of this time. And I always just think what being such a young person at that time, it must have had a wonderful profound effect, just for being that period of your 20s.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I did so much that it was like, woof. I look back on it, it was like a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Because there was so much going on. It wasn't the fact that I was with John Lennon. It was just, this was the first guy I ever lived with.
Right. Wow.
So, and it was like the first really giant romance. It was my first one, and it was like, and how do you, that's the hardest part.
Right.
That's the guy that I'm dealing with, and I don't look at him as, oh my God, it's John Lennon. I just looked at him as John Lennon, the guy that I'm living with, although he's famous. But we had other things going.
Of course, you had to you talk about rock and roll. You have conversations, working on projects together. going to functions, meeting people, and I can imagine just seeing the intimacy of John interacting with close friends, and being able to be a part of that is such a an interesting thing. And one of the things that really piqued my interest is you shared a moment that a lot of people, and it doesn't matter who they are, you shared a moment with John in New York, spotting one night a UFO over New York, one of the famous John Lennon stories.
Everybody loves to think that, we must have been high, and then that's the thing. First off, the one thing I don't ever care about, for me, and this is just me, was John knew I didn't like to take drugs. That was not my thing.
Right.
I mean, if you told me, we're going to go out for a steak dinner, I'm there. You know?
Right.
It was just there's a difference, you know. But we had just come home, and we had taken a nap from the studio, and it was getting late, and I said, "What do you want for dinner?" And he says, "Let's have a pizza." In New York, it's easy. You call up, and they come to you.
Right.
And he just got up and he went out to the balcony, and it was a summer night on Friday, in New York City. In August, where it's dead. It's dead because everybody's gone.
Right.
He walks out. He's smoking his cigarettes, and because he doesn't like smoking the French cigarettes, he used to smoke the Gauloises.
Right.
So he's out there and he's like taking a puff and he's looking at it. He's looking at the water. We faced the East River, which he loved because it reminded him of the Mersey.
Right.
He's looking at it, and he says, I hear from him, and I'm in the other room trying to find some clothes to put on, and I hear him yelling for me, and I'm going, yeah, okay, next. I'm not even paying attention. And then he yells out again, and I come running out. And I said, what do you want? And I stop. And I go, what is that? It was hanging so low over our heads that I could see the underbelly of this thing.
Wow.
To the point that you could see the heat waves, like when you're when you're driving and the ground is really hot, and it's just waving, and I could see that on the underside. And we're talking, this is like 9 o'clock at night.
Right.
And it was circular. It had white lights going around the rim, going on and off, and then there's one stable red light on top. And he says to me, I said, what? And he goes, you are seeing what I'm seeing. I said, how did this happen? What is this thing? And I'm screaming.
Right.
And no one's coming to, no one's turning on a light. I look at all the buildings. Everything is dark. And I realize even my neighbor who could have come up the stairs, no one.
Yeah.
Nobody. So everybody had gone away, and you realize it's Friday. That's what I was saying. It's a Friday night in the summer. There's no on the street that we lived on was basically a lot of people would not be there.
Right.
And they all went away, and it was just amazing to watch. But I would say I watched it anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes.
Wow.
At various intervals, yeah. And I watched it as it kept going sideways. It turned sideways.
What?
Flying, as John would start screaming, it's flying below rooftop. Oh,
wow.
My God. And I'm watching this whole thing. And it was just, if you saw it in the distance, you would think it was just a helicopter or something else.
So, right.
But you could hear the noise directly below me. And I could hear the helicopters that were flying across the river.
Right.
But not this thing that was directly over our head.
Amazing.
Nothing.
Let me ask you, have you ever seen a UFO since?
One more time. Yes, I did.
Really? Is that, I have to be honest. I saw the UFO. I don't want to get too into about me, but I was out in the desert driving, and I had 2 witnesses with me, and when you see it with somebody else,
yeah,
it changes the whole thing.
Well, you know what? Because people can't believe, they don't want to accept it that we might be. I mean, how can people think that we're the only ones left in this universe?
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, seriously. I mean, this is like, you got to be kidding me. They're probably saying the same thing in another universe.
Right. I mean,
I'm just thinking, and John was so thrilled to be able to see that.
Oh, I bet. I mean, it's just such a
Well,
profound.
radio waves get broadcasted, like once they leave the Earth's atmosphere, they go on for infinity. So, there's certainly aliens that have picked it up that have to be Beatles fans. They're like, we came all the way here just for you, man. Just be about it. They're like, get out of the saucer. Like, I can't get out of the saucer. Get out of the saucer. It's John Lennon. No, you can't.
Have to get his autograph.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting, experience. And also to be
It is. Let me tell you, I have all of John's, because John was always interested in UFOs and stuff. He had even bought the magazines, UFO magazines.
Oh, right.
Wow.
I have them somewhere, and and it's like now it made it even more real for him.
Right. It had a profound effect because he went to the radio stations afterwards. He put it on walls and bridges on the record. I mean, and it's just, I guess, to have had witnessed that. We have a couple of questions from some listeners, and I wanted to ask you. These are little small questions. Somebody wanted to know. Mark from Savannah, Georgia, wanted to know you when you were working with John, and when you were with him during this period. Did John had it was written about that he started collecting old bootlegs of the Beatles.
Bootlegs. Yeah, he loved bootlegs.
And is it true that you on a couple of times went to a couple like record swap meet Beatle things and picked up some of the records that he was looking for?
Well, you know what? He actually people would start giving it to him when he started talking about that he loved bootlegs, and if he was in some place, he'd pick it up himself because I wouldn't know what to pick up.
Oh, right.
So it's not. It was more from him, and that's how he just loved. He didn't like leaving anything, as they say. He didn't like anything being left in the can.
Right.
And so that's how that song "How Do You Do," because that was the first song that the Beatles ever recorded, and they said we could write better.
Right.
Well, little did we know he was right about that.
Of course.
So that's how all these things came about. But it was really John knew what he wanted and whatever he heard, and if anybody passed it on to me or if I saw it and he said pick it up, I would do it.
Right. And another question, someone wanted to know about the guitars. When John would work, he's got very famous guitars that he used in the Beatles that are now iconic. Right. And when he was around working in, say, New York, when you were at the Dakota or at the apartment or in L.A., did he carry around? I know that he had to go to England to get guitars brought over to America. And
I actually brought over the one that the black and white.
Right, the Rickenbacker. Right.
Was. Yeah, I remember him giving it to me. He goes, "You've seen this one." And I said, "Oh, yeah." He goes, "Take this back." As I'm coming through customs.
Right.
Is this yours? Yeah, sure. He goes, "You had to play." I said, "No."
Yeah, they want you to get out, but sit out and play.
I did not want him to be asking me, "Can you play a few notes?"
Right.
Yeah.
So it was just going to be no. And but no, he brought over his guitars when at one point, and then he bought a lot of guitars while he was here.
Right. So
when we were traveling before the Pig Nose came out, which he was so thrilled.
Oh yes.
Before the Pig Nose, we always carried the guitar, no matter where we went. So he carried his Martin acoustic on the road, and when I think he carried his Fender. I'm not sure. When I'm trying to remember when we finally took electric, we took one acoustic and one electric.
Nice.
When of course our Pig Nose.
Right. And it's so funny, and this when you guys were intimate and hanging out, and you were about to purchase a house, as the story goes, right as John returned back to Yoko.
Right.
This sounds to me very incredible. The way that this relationship kind of abruptly kind of came to an end. Can you, I guess in your own words, tell me a little bit about how this circumstance kind of happened and how it affected you?
I will just merely say that our relationship never really ended.
Right.
And it's only ended because the man is not here. Mm-hmm. But we were still in touch. We still saw each other. It was the thing was, Yoko had said to him, "Listen, I think because of immigration." And that was a big fear of John's, that he'd be kicked out of the country, and he didn't want to be kicked out.
Right.
He said, I think she suggested, as I put that in quotes, she suggested that he live at the Dakota. And but it was okay that we can still carry on our relationship, but he should come back there.
And did that mean to sleep there or to
yes.
Just to stay
whatever
there?
it is was to make. Well, let's put it this way. She had originally suggested that we should get an apartment in the Dakota because there was one available.
Right.
And John said no. There's no way that was happening.
Right.
Because, in essence, a lot of people didn't really realize that we were, together at one time.
Right.
And so this would have been just as well, like, if we had broken up, then it could always be said, no, that never happened.
Right.
But that's not the way we want it.
The thing about it is, that people don't know is that Yoko approached you in the start and kind of turned this, or put this situation on you.
Right. She wanted it because they were having a problem, and I said, I'm not interested to be part of this thing. And I had been with them for 3 years. The last thing I'm thinking about is going off with this man.
Right.
And so, but it was the man himself that approached me.
Right.
And that's the only reason why I, in the end, went out with him. Yeah. And it was not because she was trying and I said, no, I'm not interested.
Yeah, and it seems so interesting because, Yoko was still a big part of John's life throughout this period, as far as calling and checking in and things of that nature. So did you ever have conversations, I guess, talking about Yoko in a distance kind of way? Because I guess I understand she had seen other people and
yeah, she was seeing other people. Yeah. Absolutely, which is not very well mentioned. Well, she was definitely seeing other people.
Right.
And I was, and at one point they were even talk of divorce. So, which John was quite happy to. He said yes, of course.
Right.
And it was a lot of things. So as time has gone on, as you can tell, that storyline has changed.
Well, it's because we mentioned this earlier in the program, is that I think the history of the John post-Beatles John has been paved over now with just the peace love imagery, and that it was this thing almost, I don't know. There is a whole other depth that is that they weren't always together, that they weren't always getting along, and it seemed a little bit of control and a little bit of manipulation, I guess, on Yoko's part with John, and even putting you into such a position, to a degree, and it seems like it's easy to cover that up now in post, looking back and just to try to erase that.
Absolutely. The evidence, if people really look deeply, they can see it was me that was there. And then, still to this day, I'm still saying, no, but it was me. It's not, somebody else.
Right.
And, but a lot of the people actually, and I thank, some of the fans that had met John and I back then.
Right.
And, I still carry. I always feel that the truth will ultimately win out. That's how I look at it.
Well, and the other thing is, like I was saying before, you sang with John or on John's records. There are bootlegs named after you.
Yeah.
I know.
That bugs you. By the way, we played some clips from some of those earlier.
Well, that they were not meant to be out, and they were not meant to be recorded. And I found out who had sold it. It wasn't us. We didn't even know this was happening till years later.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting thing, and I love when people make these comments. Oh, it's horrible. I wouldn't buy this. Well, it wasn't meant for you to be buying.
Right.
Yeah. Well, what on
it's like it's kind of an interesting situation, but it's what people want to perceive and how they want to see things.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you. You released the book Instamatic Karma. 2008, and you were just recently in Germany. Is that correct? Promoting
Yes.
Was that for the book release in Germany? Is that?
Yes, it's a different book.
Oh, okay.
Even though it has some photos, it's entirely in German. It's all about. It's more about my relationship with John.
Wow.
And it's different. I haven't decided. We haven't approached if we were going to do it in English. And in there, it actually shows the house. I managed to get a picture of the house that John and I were going to buy.
Oh, wow.
The imitation Scottish house on Long Island that we were going to get. And it was very interesting, and it was very well received in when I was at the Frankfurt Book Fair.
Right.
So, excuse me.
No problem.
Of course, I'm coughing. I'm still getting over a cold.
Oh yes, I hope you're feeling better. Yeah. By the way, from the cold.
Yes, no, I'm getting there. It's just that last bit. They don't.
It stays with you.
Yeah. So, the book is great. I had a great time, a wonderful time in Germany. They were just wonderful people over there, and I got a chance to see all the spots where the boys played. At the Indra, the Star Club, where, and some of the places are still there, and it was wonderful going into the doorway of where John stood from the rock and roll cover. Jorgen Vollmer.
Right. That is amazing. I mean, yeah. I imagine. I don't know. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I imagine just standing in that doorway. Just to be in that doorway for a minute, it kind of take you out of your body for a second.
It was great. I mean, it was wonderful. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to see Jorgen. Apparently, he's much more of a recluse these days. But he knew I was there to ask about him, and he asked his friend to bring some stuff to give to me. It's nice. I hopefully that. And there's supposed to be an article. That will be coming out on Stern magazine, which is the largest magazine in Germany.
Right.
And there'll be a spread out there, and it's great. I enjoyed, like I said, being in Germany. The people were lovely.
Right,
they really were.
But you don't have any. You're on the fence. You're deciding whether you're going to release this book in America.
Right, because I have other. I'm thinking of doing it in English, expanding and telling stories that didn't make it the first time.
Right.
There were a lot of stories because at the time the publishers at Warner's felt, the more salacious. I mean, there's a lot of things. Even though it was a good book, I will definitely tell you that a lot of the things that they made it like the more making John sound like he was a maniac.
Right.
It was not something that I put in. It was more how my co-author worked with the. I was too green at the time.
Right.
And so the publishers went to town. And I was not happy on a few things, but I couldn't say anything.
Right. So,
nowadays it's a little different.
I was going to say, now that time has passed, to really be able to tell the story, closer to what you really wanted back then when you put out the book. Now that time has passed, you could probably have that opportunity. I really would love to read this. To read this book, I'm going to have to study up on my German.
I know. I said the same thing.
It's a picture book, so I'll be okay.
Yeah. I have to do the same thing, but I actually, I've actually written it in English, and then it was translated into German.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So if you started that way.
If it should come to the English version, then I do have the English version.
That's
so
good.
It's not too difficult, but no, it's been. Like I said, 40 years ago now, I mean, John did, God, there was so much work in between, you're thinking about back together again with his son.
Right.
He's back together with his brothers. He gave away songs to, Johnny Winters and Keith Moon.
Right.
We had Harry. Everybody thought that, John's pal, his favorite. Yeah, we hung out with Harry, but I know that Harry's best friend was also Ringo.
Right.
We just happened to be the new kids on the block walking into the situation.
Yeah, and I think the misconception is that, John was out with Harry every night, getting thrown out of the Troubadour every night.
No, it appears that way, but it isn't. But that isn't the way it happened.
Right.
So, but again, that's to the fault of and I blame John on this one too. But he got tired of everybody kept asking, and by that point when everybody's asking, he's back at the Dakota, and what are you supposed to say? He had a great time with me.
Right.
Yeah, that became a little awkward,
Right.
And we actually talked about this, and I was, a lot of my friends said I wouldn't have taken half of it, and it is what it is.
Right. Do you remember the last time you spoke with John?
Oh yeah. He called me from Cape Town, South Africa.
Oh wow.
And it was during what was it? It was Memorial Weekend. And all of a sudden I picked up this phone, and all he had to do was say hello, and I knew whose voice it was.
Right.
And I said, "Oh, what's going on? Where are you?" I ended up speaking. My friends that were at my house all left me because we were on the phone for so long. And I said, "I'll see you guys later. Goodbye."
Right.
I'm on the phone, and we spent over an hour and a half talking about who I've seen, what was happening in my life,
right.
his life. And then, and then all the personal stuff came out in the sense of how much he missed seeing me and how he was trying to figure out a way to catch up with me.
Right. And let me ask you this. I mean, after the intense part of the relationship cooled off a little bit, did you ever run or have contact with Yoko after that?
I think the only time I had contact with Yoko was about a few years ago.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, I mean it was after the we had all been involved in the Morris Levy lawsuit, and after that was over in like 77, 76, 77, I really didn't have anything to do with her.
Right.
And I didn't see her. I think it was in 2005.
Wow.
Around that time period, yeah.
And
that was about the only time that I had seen her. We were in the same room together.
Did you speak or have anything to say, and not just acknowledged?
Well, I went over to her to say hello, and she just looked at me and said hello, and then she turned her head, and I said, "Well, I did my part."
Right.
And I went back and I sat down,
yeah.
and then I turned around, and then I saw this woman. I see her wandering around. I said, "Oh God, she's looking for me." I knew that. I could sense it. And so we're in this restaurant, and you could tell that everybody was, because we were in Iceland.
Wow.
It just happened we were both in Iceland.
Of all places, right?
Yeah. And it was not that the tower hadn't been built. This was about I think it was a John Lennon songwriting contest or something.
Right.
And so she then came around and stood at the end of where the tables were, and she started waving, and I'm thinking, is she waving to me? And I turned my head and to look back, and I said, well, I guess it is me, because there's nobody else behind me.
Right.
And she was waving, and now all of a sudden it was a very friendly wave, as opposed to the first time like
a cold wave, right?
Yes. So and I just said hello, and I said, and my girlfriend sat, who's opposite me. She says, "Who are you waving to?" I said, "Yoko," and she said, "You're kidding."
Right.
And she looked over; she couldn't believe it. So it was, to me, is like, take two, let's go back.
Right. But it's have you? I mean, when you throughout releasing these books, you haven't had any kind of.
Oh, wait a minute! There's one more thing. I just realized.
Oh, is that okay?
Just a couple of years ago, when Julian had his first opening, his photography.
Right.
Cynthia, me, Patty.
Wow.
Patty Boyd, and Yoko. We were all in the same room. But I don't think there was a photograph to be allowed.
Oh, right.
Yeah. All of us.
Somebody
can't do that.
Load.
No, because I know that my photos got erased out of the event.
Is that right?
Wow.
Oh yeah.
So
friends of mine called me up because I just saw you on Wire Image. All of a sudden you click, you see the name, and you click on it, and it goes, "No such photo."
Wow.
Is it that great of a length for somebody to go and try to erase you out of history? I mean, is it really that bad?
Well, you think about it. I'll let me put it this way. If you read the books that are officially sanctioned,
right,
I'm nowhere to be found. Really.
Right.
Mm.
So if you find a book that has no not necessarily I'm involved in it, but I just
if you don't appear in the book, in the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could figure it out from there.
Right.
And it's most of the time, and that's the way it is.
Right.
I mean, it's very obvious, but you can figure it out for yourself.
Right.
Because it's not about anything. I'm just talking about the truth. And then someone said to me, "Well, isn't it? You should be happy that you know that John loved you." And I said, "Yeah, but it's not enough because now my life has been turned inside out by somebody else."
Right.
And I don't think anybody would want that. And they said, "Well, it's the private." I said, "No, it's not private anymore."
Yeah.
Because everybody talks about it.
Right.
And it's like, and I had to make a point, and I said this to many people. If you were out there and you know that you've done something and you were part of something very big, but somebody else took the credit, but you know you're the one, how would you feel? And they said, "I wouldn't like it." I said, "Well, there."
Exactly.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how, what the impact on, like, your and John's relationship had you had, like, what modern days paparazzi just up in everybody's face all the time. Like, I know there was, one of the things I've always heard about John is that he liked New York because he was able to just be an average Joe and just kind of blend in without being swamped. Yet, I think by today's standards, he would be swamped, like they would know his
somebody of
every
his
move.
magnitude,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
I think he would be, but I also think he would be firm enough and say, "Hey, listen, guys, please give me some room."
Right.
I think everybody would respect him a little bit more because he'll give you your time and then say, "Hey, listen." And if it's somebody that won't give him the time, be prepared not to be able to get into the where photographers should be going to any event.
Right.
And especially nowadays, the PR people are much more vigilant about keeping some people out.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah,
I've got to say, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank
And
you for having me on.
I love it. And I want to say you've got the website maypeng.com that everybody can visit.
It's gone live.
It has gone live officially. We're the first people to announce the new website.
Nice.
Absolutely, and I'm going to be at Chiller. If anybody's on the East Coast, we're coming to it.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Chiller is an autograph show event more for horror story,
Oh, right.
And so, but I'm appearing there, God knows. But, there's a lot of music people that's involved in that one, as well as I saw that Tatum O'Neal's going to be there.
Right.
The Sons of Anarchy, if you like that.
Oh, yeah.
Hulk Hogan.
There it is, yes.
Wait a minute, I got the best one, the four amazing Japanese guys who played Godzilla.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's great.
They were. Oh, wait a minute. Happy Days. The crew of Happy Days.
Oh, is that right?
Henry Winkler, Marion Ross.
Wow.
And Cindy Williams, who I know, and then and Henry Winkler. John and I also walked onto the set of Happy Days.
Days, right?
The very first episode. Not the first episode, but the
first season
of it. Yeah.
Right.
And so we just happened to be wandering through the Paramount sets, and we also landed on Mannix as well.
Wow.
We were taking Julian out, and so I was, organizing different things to do.
Right. You're just going through the studios.
I mean, and to think that, Henry Winkler and Ron Howard are going, "Oh my God, that's John Lennon." But nobody realizes that day we also went on the set of The Odd Couple.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And we sat through one of the shows when they were filming it.
Through the taping. That's. And I know John was a big television fanatic, so I imagine being on the sets of these shows, he probably was tickled.
Oh, absolutely!
Oh,
yeah,
of
great
course.
time. That's why I said it was a lot of fun. I mean, we've seen everybody from Mae West to Cary Grant.
Right.
These are the people, and George Burns was a sweetheart to me. There was a lot of people. We saw in the distance because Jagger was at the same thing too.
Oh, wow.
We saw John Wayne. We saw Kirk Douglas, Steve McQueen.
Wow.
With Ally McGraw. There was a lot of people.
That is it's such an amazing time. You know what? I want to. Your original book is now out of print, but
right.
I
would love to redo the book itself and put in the stories.
I think the world is ready for that. I know I am.
Oh, great.
And I tell you what, we can catch up with you at the new maypang.com website is now available, and Instamatic Karma is up. You can order the book. May, I tell you what, I would love to have you back on the program sometime. We could probably talk for days.
Come in the studio.
If you're ever in San Francisco, you should stop by the studio.
I definitely will. I was just there a couple of months ago. I'd love to.
Oh, that'd be great. It's been a sensation, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us today. And
absolutely, San Francisco, I love. And John and I loved it because we sailed around Alcatraz Island.
Oh, yes. I want. Well, if you know what, we'll rent a boat if you come back.
Oh, great! I love it. We'll do that. We'll definitely do that.
Thank you so much, May. You have a great day, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thanks.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. May Pang.